morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Good. For those of you who don't know me briefly, I have been an educator for 30 years. I work nationally and internationally. My background, I've taught, I ran an infant toddler through grade 8 program, and I've taught high school math. And I now teach graduate school, which is not that different from teaching middle school, for those of you who are wondering. So I have my PhD is not in curriculum or assessment, it's in brain development. So if you want to have conversations about why my son's brain is different from my mother's brain, I'm certainly happy to have those conversations with you. But our purpose today is really about designing assessments for diagnosis and prescription. And the way you're doing that is with aligning them to standards. So I'm going to go through some protocols for how to do that. We're going to look at some examples, and we're going to really look at a way for you to approach that assessment process. So here we go. Looking at the relationship between standards, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, we can work through a real brief analogy. Standards are very similar to building codes. Building codes are there for a structure for safety. So they say things like outlets need to be 1.5 feet off the ground, right, in case of flooding. So standards are statements of our minimum expectation of what a student should be able to know or be able to do. That's what standards are. Standards are not curriculum. Standards don't control that. So they really are just statements of minimum expectations that are there for safety. So curriculum, on the other hand, curriculum has identity. So if you and I are looking at a curriculum, it's what we actually experience in a given year with a given group of students. Is it enough to say that standards are not curriculum? Standards are the minimum expectations. Curriculums go above standard. When you and I are looking at conversations around evidence of standards, you're talking about the minimum of expectation and assessment design. Whereas if you're talking about assessment evidence of curriculum, you're really talking about the top. You're talking about, well, how far can students go? What can they really do? And so in our analogy, that would really be the building, the actual building, or the blueprint for the building, a unit plan. And it also has the identity of your school. Standards are not the identity of our school, right? So they say things like student will be able to add fractions, whereas a curriculum might have them add fractions to be able to design a treehouse or design a building. So that's where you're going to show rigor. You're going to show how far the student can really go. So assessment design for standards really is going to be diagnosis and prescription to make sure there's no gap at the bottom. But an assessment evidence of curriculum is going to be, and here's where they get really cool words like worthy and meaningful and joyful and all these other pieces. Assessment evidence of standards is actually quite bland and sterilized because I need to be able to do diagnosis and prescription with every item. Assessment evidence of instruction is also going to look different. That's about engagement. And that's really going to show up in something like a self-navigation tool. The idea here is that standards represent the minimum, curriculum represents above standard. All curriculums should go above standard. So there's a difference between the words standard and expectations. Okay. I can have very high expectations, but the standard is the standard. And when you're assessing or designing assessments of the standards, you really are protecting against a gap. So that means if I were going to have assessments of all these different pieces, could you and I just agree to call bucket 1, bucket 2, and bucket 3? A bucket 1 assessment is evidence of the standards. It's the minimum. It's diagnosis and prescription. A bucket 2 assessment is evidence of the curriculum. It's relevant, contemporary. They can be authentic performances. They're rigorous. They're awesome. They get cool words. And then bucket 3 assessments are going to be evidence of instruction, meaning the student engaged. This is why we say teaching is an invitational art. Okay. So to what extent did the student accept the invitation, right? So that idea would be bucket 3 assessments. I don't want us to get confused with our terminology around formative or summative or a formal or informal. I just want to suspend all that. And we're just going to have bucket 1, bucket 2, and bucket 3. 1 is evidence of standards. 1 is evidence of the curriculum. And I don't try to make them the same event. This is very, very important, because if I'm trying to identify a gap, but I make it too rigorous, then I might end up sabotaging my ability to do diagnosis and prescription. And we'll see examples of that in a minute. Okay, so assessing student, it could be a performance or a task. We'll talk about that. But the meaning of the word assess, if I go to the Latin foundation, it means to sit beside. And that becomes very important for us to look at assessments as being designed to help the children. It's not about sorting kids. It's not about grading kids. It's about creating a feedback tool for them that's diagnosis and prescription. To be clear, many assessments are autopsies. What do I mean by that? I mean, I give them at the end to see if the children got it, but then there's nothing they can do to improve their performance. I'm trying to find out what happened. Okay. That's an autopsy. You and I, when we talk about assessment evidence of standards, we're in diagnosis and prescription. The students are still alive. Yay. And so we really want them to be able to get this diagnosis and prescription feedback. That also means every single item in a bucket 1 assessment is going to be providing an immediate prescription. If it doesn't, then it could be stronger. It could be a better design. That's how we're going to evaluate our own assessments. So when we're making these assessments, we have to think, why am I assessing? What am I assessing? And who am I communicating those results to? So you and I are talking about communicating these results to children and to helping them get precise enough feedback so they can actually improve their performance. It's not just about you and I making decisions about our instruction. That's a secondary. That's cool. It's going to be awesome. But I actually want the children to be able to use this feedback. Okay. So it could be a tangible product, okay? A piece of writing, a picture, a spreadsheet, a photograph, okay? What you're looking at here were students working on, I guess it was like movie art, movie makeup designs. So a costume, a photograph, a blueprint, these could be tangible products. It could also be some sort of observable performance. So the student doing a performance, so maybe I have a recording, maybe it's a speech or a recital or a puppet show or a debate or a dance, a game, or a reading. And those can be recorded or be documented with teacher observation or student reflection. So when we talk about assessment design, we're going to label our items by what assessment design level they are. So today, you and I are only going to talk about 3.0 and 2.0 assessments. 3.0 and 2.0 assessments are assessments that are designed to have the entire standard and only the standard. That's a 3.0 item. Or a 2.0 item, which would be a part of the standard or a prerequisite standard, a prerequisite element, or a deep diagnostic. These are types of assessment items. And seriously, we're just going to call them that because that's what the assessment was designed to get evidence of. To be clear, I'm not talking about a rubric or something where I'm giving feedback to the kids and I say, oh, they got a 3, right? Or a 4 or a 2. Rubrics are used to evaluate student performance or student work. Everyone with me on that? Meaning I give the assessment to a child. There we go. I give the assessment to the child, and then I use a rubric to give them feedback or grade them. And then the student work is either a 3 or a 2 or a 1 or something like that. What you and I are doing is we're saying, I'm going to design an assessment, and this number is evaluating the assessment before I ever give it to a child. Meaning, will the assessment evaluate the whole standard, or will the assessment only be asking for part of the standard? I'm already controlling what the assessment is getting evidence of. And then the child gets it either correct or incorrect. How are we doing? You with me on this? Look at your colleagues, help them lean in. Any questions on that part? I will say it again. Rubrics are used to evaluate student work after they've taken the assessment. What this list is showing you is you're going to rank the assessment item before the children ever see it, meaning we're going to evaluate whether the item is actually evidence of the standard or only part of the standard. Okay, so here we go. So bucket 1 assessments, that's all we're going to talk about right now. It's going to be the evidence of the standard and only the standard. So we are going to sterilize these assessments. I kid you not. They're like boring. Okay, is everyone with me on this? These are boring, quick assessments to give, quick assessments to score, quick assessments to get back to the kids. Seriously, I'm talking short, to the point, and you're going to be like, Marie, these are so easy. They are way too easy. And I'm going to go, imagine what you learn if they get it wrong. They were so easy. Imagine what you learn if they get it wrong. I'm not trying to find out what the student can do at the top. That is a completely different kind of assessment design. Seriously, I'm just trying to make sure there isn't a gap. Okay, so it's a completely different piece, and we're going to have to get comfortable with that. In fact, we're totally going to call these like 3.0 and 2.0 assessments. That's your immediate trigger that these are cake. The kids should be able to do them quickly, but if they can't, you just identified a gap. For example, imagine it's a sequencing part of a standard, and I give the kids a 3-paragraph essay. Everyone with me on this? But I cut it up and I just say, put this essay in order. And let's say I'm doing that with my 4th graders. And you're like, are you kidding me, Marie? That is way too easy. And I'm going to go, yes, but imagine what you learn if the child isn't successful on it. Immediate prescription. They can't even recognize an introductory paragraph, a details paragraph, and a conclusion. I now have an idea as to why they're struggling with taking that outline and writing. That's what these assessments are all about. Okay, awesome. All right, so diagnosis and prescription, we're going to create 2.0 and 3.0 items. That's it. I'm not playing with anything else. All right, so there are two ways to do this. Option one, you begin with the standard. So you totally just take a standard, then you write out the learning targets that would be required for a 3.0 item, which would require the whole standard. And then you take those, you cut and paste them, and then you have all the individual learning targets. I could make 2.0 items to match up to. And I could even write some prerequisite items that would also count as approaching standard or part of the standard. If the standard has an or, then you might end up making a 2.0 item that's a deep diagnostic. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But seriously, you just write the learning targets for the standard. Don't overthink this. It really is that easy. Please don't play the game called, I can write a better verb for that, right? I don't want you to wordsmith these into a giant dissertation in your content area. You're just seriously taking the standard and writing learning targets for it. And I'll show you some examples. We're totally going to put those learning targets on the assessment item. Let me show you an example. It's going to look like this. Let me make this larger. Can you see my screen? Did it suddenly show lots of different crayons? Yeah? Okay. So this is second grade. Notice right here, can you see this? Let me make this darker and larger for you just so that you can see it. This tells you it's second grade, measurement and data standard A1, and it's a 3.0 item. So I know that this assessment item is the entire standard. So that if the child gets this correct, I have evidence at standard. I'm not using a rubric for this. Now, here are the two learning targets. I can measure the length of an object, and I can choose a tool to measure. So if I go back to the actual standard, can you see that? I'm trying to make it larger. Let me, woohoo. So it says measure the length of an object. All right. So on the assessment, I can measure the length of an object. Notice how it's almost word for word right to the standard. Yay. That's what I want. Don't change it. Don't get clever. You totally want it to be approachable and accessible to the kids, though. So this is a bunch of second graders. Next. Okay. Measure the length of an object. Ooh, by selecting and using appropriate tools. And then it gives me a bunch of such as's. Please don't put all the such as's in with the learning targets unless it's, I can use a ruler, I can use a yardstick, I can use a meter stick. Okay, yeah, you had me at hello. But on this assessment, they had, I can choose a tool to measure, because it's a bunch of second graders and we just wanted to keep the vocabulary easy. How are we doing? Thank you. All right, good. So option one, use a ruler to measure the length of the following objects. All right, so that would be I can measure the length of an object. And then next, circle the appropriate tool to measure each object. So height of the classroom door, ruler, or tape measure. Piece of paper, ruler, or yardstick. Next one, learning target. Now this is going to be a 2.0 item. Let me make this larger for you also. So notice this item is the same standard, but a 2.0 item. So see how they're working here on these pieces. So what the teachers have decided is that this one, option one, with the A and the B, that's all one assessment item. It's got an A and a B because the standard had two parts. So the child has to get all of it correct or the item is incorrect, meaning I don't have evidence at standard. But if the child gets part B incorrect, What's the prescription? Well, diagnosis. They're not at standard. Prescription. They need to practice types of measuring tools. If they get A incorrect, prescription, they need to practice actually measuring items. So every part of the item results in diagnosis and prescription. And it can't be, well, work on this whole chapter or work on this entire standard. Some of your standards have 5, 6 parts, right? I can't say reteach the whole standard. So I want an item that isolates out each part of the standard so that I get diagnosis and prescription of exactly what the child should be practicing in order to improve their performance. Okay, so sorry, these are just more examples. This is a 5th grade example. And if you want examples at your grade level or your content area, we can look at those. Oh, no, Marie, where are we? Here we are. Okay. So option 1, your choice was to begin with the standard, write those I can statements for the standard, which tells you everything that 3.0 item should have. And then you make an item with like an A, B, C, D for each learning target. Perfect. A 2.0 item is just one of those I can statements. I might give that as a do now or an exit ticket, a little quiz. It could be a classroom activity. Life is good. Don't overthink that. Again, I'm not worried about whether it's formative or summative and all this stuff. I just care, is it evidence at the diagnosis and prescription level? Okay. So you create an assessment or item that aligns to the 3.0 level. And then I strongly suggest making at least 2 2.0 items. Okay. You tend to give the 2.0 items before the 3.0 item. Then store it in an item bank. You should have several 3.0 items and several 2.0 items. Can I level with you for 1 second? When we do audits of school districts and we look at all their items, we find tons of items that are above standard, and we find tons of items that are 2.0s or part. The ethereal unicorn of the assessment world is the 3.0 item, where it's actually just the standard, right? So if you're going to put effort into this, seriously, go after those 3.0 items. They're the ones you and I are missing. Okay, back to our story. That's option 1. Let's look at option 2. Option 2 as a protocol, you take an item that you already have. And when you take an item that you already have, you have to figure out what standard it represents. Once you figure out what standard it represents, then you can evaluate the item. Is it a 3.0 item? Does it have every single part of the standard? Or is it missing a part? Does it have more than the standard? Because if it does more than the standard, it's a 4.0 item. Because now I can't do diagnosis and prescription. Or is it a 2.0 item? Once you've evaluated that item, then you make a choice. You could revise the item. Maybe you just tweak it and suddenly it becomes a perfect 3.0 or 2.0 item. Or you keep the item exactly as it is. It's perfect. Huzzah. Or you discard the item, or you use it as evidence of the curriculum, but not evidence of the standard. Let me be clear. Some of your items are so off from this, you're not going to get to use it for diagnosis and prescription. That doesn't mean you don't use the item. It's probably an awesome curricular event. It's just not good as evidence of the standard. Okay. So for example, let's say I have a standard that says they have to add and subtract double-digit numbers. Okay. Now let's say I put that into a 4-sentence word problem. If I do that, now if the child gets it correct, awesome. But what happens if the child gets it incorrect? What's the prescription? I can't diagnose if the issue is they couldn't add and subtract double-digit numbers, Or was it reading the word problem that was the issue? Because I can't do that, I can't do diagnosis and prescription. That's a 4.0 item. That's above standard. Again, maybe that's my expectation. That's fantastic. That's called a curriculum piece. But I can't do diagnosis and prescription of that standard, which was just add and subtract double-digit numbers. Okay, turn to a colleague, process that, make sure everyone in the room is comfortable with what I just said. How are we doing there? I'm watching our time. Don't worry, we're going to be okay. Absolutely. What I'll do is I will take it and put it into a PDF and put it in the same folder that I used with the last group. And I can also put tons of diagnostic assessments in there as well. I just wanted to get them the general idea. Yep. You got it. Okay, team, finish that thought. Please thank your partner for speaking with you. All right, now let's dive in and look at some examples. This one, see these? You can tell immediately that these are assessment items for diagnosis and prescription, or what you and I are going to call bucket one assessment items, because in the upper right-hand corner, it has the standard and the level. If it's a 2.0, it's part of the standard or a prerequisite. And if it says 3.0, it's the whole standard. So these are just part of the standard. Fantastic. Now, if I look at this one, now I see it's a reading standard, and check this one out. The reading standard had 3 parts. There was an A, a B, and a C. So I need to have all 3 of those on the same item to say it's evidence of standard. And diagnosis and prescription, if the child gets one part wrong, I now know what they need to practice in order to improve their performance. Okay, excellent. So I can almost see the I can statements that would go along with this. I'm a firm believer, put the I can statements right on the assessment, and we'll look at those. So what counts as diagnosis and prescription, or what you and I are going to call 2.0 and 3.0 items? Everything, okay? Classwork, drill and practice, centers and stations I might set up in my classroom. Because in kindergarten through 5th grade, this is how we get our evidence. This is diagnosis and prescription. So I could see this working almost any situation, as long as you're getting genuine evidence of that standard the way you designed it, which means we just need to label the items as 2.0 or 3.0 assessment items or events. Okay. The hard part's going to be figuring out which standards they actually align to. All right, so bucket one, create what you and I are going to do, creating the learning targets as they align to the standard. We're going to do that together. Then you select which protocol you're going to do, number 1 or number 2. The first one started with the standard. The second protocol started with an assessment item you already have. That was the main difference. Just between you and I, option 1 is the fastest, okay? But option 2 is the one most teachers feel more comfortable with the first couple of rounds. And then when you get frustrated with your own items, just go back to option 1 and create the item, because you're going to be like, I just wish the item said blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, write that down. That's what you wanted it to be. Okay. But that's why we have both options. All right, so if I'm looking at your items, this is the protocol I'm going to use and what I want you to use to evaluate whether your item is a high quality evidence of standards item. So what is the standard? If someone comes up to you and goes, oh, hey, I'm so glad you're here. Is this a good 3.0 item? Do not engage. Don't even start answering the question. What you need to do first is go, oh, I don't know if that's a 3.0 item or not. What is the standard? And then what are the learning targets for that standard? Otherwise, do not engage in a conversation about that standard. You can't answer it. Walk away. Okay, no, now here we go. Next, what are the learning targets? I need to know that the standard got broken down into student-friendly learning targets because they're going to have to come up with the evidence. Is the item in format? What that means is, remember that upper right-hand corner where I was labeling every item with the standard and the level? We really do want every item labeled. That's how you know it's a bucket 1 item. Everyone with me on that? Bucket 2 items, they're going to look different. They're going to be PBLs of every kind, which is project-based learning or problem-based learning or phenomenon-based learning. Who knew everything began with the letter P? Hold on, sorry, the captions keep going off. I apologize for that. Okay, now, in terms of this, that's what you and I mean by format. I'm also going to ask that we put the learning targets on the items. That's just helpful for the kids and also helpful for you aligning it to what you're doing in the classroom. Is the item assessing only the standard? This is very important. If you're assessing more than the standard, it's above standard, and likely it's a part of your curriculum, not the sterilized evidence of just the standard. All right, last but not least, is the item accessible and approachable to students? And that's going to be very important, and that's going to be a high end of feedback. So this is the protocol. Woohoo! Yay! This is all we're doing. Don't overthink it. Let's look at some examples, shall we? All right, seriously, this goes all the way up to high school doing this same method, but I think I only have K through 5 in the room. Is that right? Yeah, so why don't we go look at some K through 5 examples? Oh, grades. Oh, grade 2. Here you go. Let's take a look. Nope, sorry, that's a P scale. Aha, here we go. Grade 2, here's the assessment item. Let's take a look. So name and date. Now right here, can you see that all right? Do you see how the standard is sitting right there? It's RI5 and it's a 3.0 item. So I know right off the bat, this is the whole standard. It's as easy as that. Now, I know text features and I can use text features to find key facts or information. So the or was put together. Okay, use the text about snakes to answer the following questions. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So they provided the text. Notice it's incredibly sterilized and incredibly boring. I get it, but that's what this kind of highly sterilized evidence of standards. In class, they could have been learning about so many other amazing, awesome things. But this was just about proof of standard. And this might have been given at the end of a lesson. Quickly, kids, just give me these, and then we're done. And I have diagnosis and prescription. You ready to look at another example? Let's go see another. And I'll give you this whole slideshow. All right, grade 5, this one's for you. Oh, cool. This is going to be a reading foundation standard. Oh, fun will be had by all. Let's check it out. Okay, diagnostic assessment for reading foundational skills, RF5 3A. Again, this is a 3.0 item. Here are the learning targets. That's right from the standard. Again, don't change everything. Directions: break apart the following words using syllabication strategies and then read the words. Choose one of the words from the list above. Use what you know about prefixes, suffixes, and roots to explain the meaning of the word. Now, this is a 2.0 item. So technically, I could have given those first pages on one day, and I can give this one on a different day. Everyone with me on that? You can tear these apart and use them. Doesn't mean the entire assessment has to happen at once. In fact, very rarely would you put 2.0 and 3.0 items on the same assessment. Usually the 2.0 items are early on in the unit. The 3.0 item is kind of mid-unit because that's sometimes really early because they're the minimum expectations. I really need to have these diagnosis and prescription things going on during the unit, while the project and the things that are going above standard are something different. All right. Does it help to look at examples? Do we need to see another one? Let's take another. These are high school. Let's go in. Here's a good example. Okay, for fourth grade, this is an ELA fourth grade. Notice again, this is RL1, this is a 2.0 item. Just the one item. Notice the next item is also labeled. So you don't just label like at the top of the test, every single item is labeled. That's for that diagnosis and prescription. So this is an SL4, speaking and listening standard 4, 2.0 item. Oh, they're telling jokes, Halloween jokes. See, I was trying to do that Halloween theme with some of that crazy costume makeup we had. All right. So speaking clearly to present a joke to the class. Oh, here's an SL4 3.0 item. So this is the whole, and notice the learning targets, and these should align directly to that standard. So fourth grade, could you give us an affirmation that this is the standard? If you look at that speaking and listening standard, I can report on a topic or text, tell a story or recount an experience. I can organize the oral report or story. I can support the main idea or theme using relevant facts or details. I can speak clearly, and I can speak at an understandable pace. Please notice they're given the story. This isn't them writing the story. The standard never said they had to write the story. It's a performance of a story. Now, my curriculum might have them write their own story and then they present it. That's fantastic. But if I have them do this and I also have them write the story and they don't succeed, was it because they couldn't write the story, or because it was so personal a story they struggled and clammed up when they were trying to speak about it? Ladies and gentlemen, you and I have a hard time doing diagnosis and prescription here if we're mixing up the standards. All right, I'm going to end it there. I know we're at the end of our time. We're coming in. Could I just pause and give you an opportunity to share with one another what from this you can take away back into your work on assessment items? You take the standard, you write I can statements for it, and then you design assessments either for every single one of them or just one of them. And that then becomes your 3.0 item and your 2.0 items. That's the idea. Questions, observations, please check with one another on what from this you feel like you can take forward and what from this you need more clarification on. I'm going to stop sharing this. Woohoo! You guys ready for your day? It's going to be a great day. Woohoo! I love this question. Love you. Okay. For this question, the idea of how many, seriously, one 3.0 item per standard is fine. These are not long assessments. It's not about points. So seriously, I can have 2 or 3 items and then that's the assessment. You're not looking for mastery. Mastery is really something tricky to prove. So the idea here is evidence of. Do I have evidence of the standard? And the answer is a yes or a no. Now, I do like having several 3.0 items, and I'll tell you why. Because I might give a 3.0 item early in a unit, let some time go by, then give a new 3.0 item so students get another chance to get proof of standard. And then after the big project and after the big presentation that you do, another 3.0 item. So the kids almost feel like it's too easy. Really? That was it? Some kids won't be able to be successful in the 3.0 item until the very end. But that would mean I need 3.0 items to be able to give them to the kids so that they have a chance at showing me evidence of standard. So keep that in mind. You're going to want to grow an item bank of 3.0 and 2.0 items for you to be able to use.